I went to a wine tasting thing once. I have a buddy of mine who's a real wine connoisseur.
Oh, yes.
And he has a wine, like a cellar in his home. Like you go into a room.
You did. You got elk in there.
Anyway, this guy's house, like he had it built. Like it's a thing. Like he's a serious wine guy, right? So anyway, his birthday. So he invites me to go to his birthday, and he's got this party with all of his wine friends. He's like, this will be a trip. You'll love it. These are all these they're in this wine tasting group that loves expensive, and they're all like very wealthy people. So like, okay, look, let's go. And this is a long time ago. I was not nearly as rich. So I go to this place, and there's these guys. They all bring these boxes, like felt-lined boxes with wine in them. You know, so they like open up these crates and they pull out the bottles, and they have offerings like, you know, Eddie brought this and Mike brought that and Sally brought this. And so they have these wines, and they would bring out these. It was a very nice restaurant. So they bring out like these small plates of food, and each plate, like there's 8 plates, would come with like a flight of wines. So you'd have like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Okay. And then they would tell you what this was. You know, this was a blah, blah, blah from Bordeaux. And they would all judge it, and they would say, this one it's rich with tannins, and you can taste the oak, and they would smell it. And so cut to many years later, I'm watching this documentary, and this documentary is called Sour Grapes. And this documentary is about this guy who was in that wine group. He was a part of that wine tasting group that my friend was in. I did not know this when I was watching the documentary.
Okay.
I'm watching this documentary, and I see my friend. He's in this film. And then I see this other guy who's in this film, who's the guy who gets arrested. And what this guy was doing was taking cheap wine.
Oh, I saw that.
And he was making fake labels.
Yes.
And he was like aging the labels and rubbing dirt on them and all kinds of shit.
What a legend.
And well, he went to jail for a long fucking time. And this guy made millions and millions of dollars and did this with thousands and thousands of bottles of wine. It's a fascinating, fascinating documentary, because one of the things it reveals in the documentary is that these people can't really tell what's great and what's not great. And that this one guy who had this amazing palate, I forget what his name was, but he had this amazing ability to like sense like what the essence of these very expensive wines were and recreate it with cheap wines. So he'd add a little bit of, he's like a chemist. So he's in his fucking Studio City house with like stacks of labels and old bottles. He'd buy old bottles. And he would mix this stuff together to try to make like a reasonable facsimile of whatever this like exceptionally expensive wine was. And then he would sell it.
How did he get busted?
He got busted because he robbed the Koch brothers.
Well, hold on.
He fucked
went
up.
down another
he
route.
fucked up because one of the Koch brothers is a wine expert. And this guy was a wine collector, and he's the same kind of deal. He had this big-ass wine cellar in his home, and he had all of these wines that were, like, really expensive, like wines from the 1700s that are, like, $1 million a bottle, that kind of shit.
Yes.
Crazy stuff, right? And so someone was looking at his bottles of wine, and it was like, this is not right. Like, this is wrong. Like, this is spelled wrong. This is from the wrong era. Like, this company didn't make a Magnum in this era. That's his
guy
name,
starts
Rudy.
sweating.
That guy, Rudy.
Good on
Rudy
you,
is the
Rudy.
guy who I met. I met him at this wine party. I remember him because they were all sitting around talking about all these different wines and the flavors. And so click on those bottles down there, the one that shows the label. Yeah. So those are fake bottles that Rudy had created. And one of the companies, one of the wine producers, one of the vineyards, they had seen in Sotheby's, they were auctioning off wine, and they had seen that there was labels of wines from their vineyard that they had never produced. And so they got involved with it as well. And the Koch brothers had realized that they had gotten taken. They started like severely investigating and looking deep into this, and they found that this guy had done this with so many bottles of wine that there was literally thousands of them out there that were counterfeit that had been sold for untold amounts of money.
And he's just making them in his underpants in Studio City.
It's not just that. He had I think it was his brother. His brother was involved. Was he from Indonesia? Is that where he's from? It was from another country, and his brother was involved in some banking scam where he had bilked people out of fucking millions of dollars for selling millions and millions of dollars of fake wines, and then gets out and the money was not recovered. And 2 years later, Tansil bribed his way out of prison and escaped to China, where he's believed to be today. Wow.
420 million.
So in 2019, the government seized 2.1 million worth of wine that this guy, Kurniawan, that's Rudy, had stored at the wine cellarage in New York City. But Vasquez listed a lot of other wines owned by, I don't know how to say his last name, that the auction house Christie's, it's not Sotheby's, sorry, it's Christie's, was holding out of reach of the U.S. government. Wow. Wild shit, man.
But now that 2.1 million that they've seized is worth shit because it's just crap wine.
Well, look at this. It says, she said that out of the 20 million in property that Rudy owes the U.S. government, more than 18 million had not been collected. This is wild stuff, man. It's a wild documentary because it exposes this weird kink that these people have of having this wine that's very difficult to get. But it's not much better.
I think it's funny just because these wankers talking about the tannins in their wine and this one's worth way more, and this guy's just like, fucking put this label on and charge them that for it.
Well, this guy was really good at it, man.
They'll make a movie about it.
He fooled a lot of people. But in this film, this one guy who opens the bottle goes, "This is one of the real bottles that Rudy had sold me." And so they're drinking it, and then one of the guys is like, "Yes, this is great, this is great." And the other guy sniffs it and tastes it. He goes, "How long has this been open?" And he's like, "Oh, a couple hours." And he goes, "This is piss. This is like skunk piss. This is terrible. This is fake. This is not nearly the effervescence. It doesn't have the je ne sais quoi." And like he's using all these. He's like, "I'm a real expert. This wine's bullshit." And it's like,
it's beneath
God.
me.
And so my friend who I talked to, who was in the documentary, I was like, how much can you tell? Like, how much can you tell? He's like, Rudy had an incredible palate, and he had this ability to recognize. Like, there are some people, allegedly, I'm not sure this is real. This might be like the fucking Chinese death touch. But there was some people, like Kung Fu death, where they pretend they can, and people go flying. He goes, there's some people that you can open up a bottle of wine, they can sip it, and they can throw it around their mouth, and they can tell you what part of the world it's from, what vineyard it's from. Like, they have an exceptional palate.
Yeah.
This is supposedly true.
I think that's true.
I think it's true. But I don't know. So I'm just saying supposedly. And he was saying Rudy was one of those guys. He had an exceptional palate. Like, some people are exceptionally good at creating music. He was exceptionally good at recognizing, like, the vintage of certain wines.
I applaud this guy. I'm all for it. I'm all for crime against idiots.
Well, it's hard to feel sorry for them.
Well, it's their own fault. They're sitting there going, "This is exceptional," and blah, blah. Yes, I'll pay this for that. You paid for it. Well, he didn't sell it at a store and hustle a bunch of regular people. He sold it to dickheads.
The Koch brother guy who had it, he had some wine that like was from fucking Thomas Jefferson and some shit. Like some really fucking old wine with like people's signature on it, and they were like, "That's not his signature. This is not real."